hugely important for us.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, so as Andrea sort of alluded to, it's been a pretty exciting day. We've seen many presentations which showcase really the integral role that art and technology plays in the UK's creative economy. I want to spend the next 20 minutes or so presenting some data and some research findings which show that this integrated sort of role that art and technology plays in the creative economy is very much a striking feature of data too. And I'll start off by explaining how the UK defines the creative economy for policy purposes, how it measures it, and also critically the allied concept of the creative industries. We are, after all, a creative industries forum. How does that relate to the creative economy? I'll also show you how and why artistic and ICT-related production are both core elements of the UK's creative economy, and how future technology trends will bring them even closer together. If there's time, I want to outline how arts and cultural organisations in the UK, performing arts organisations, visual arts organisations, museums, etc., are making use of digital technologies and pursuing their artistic and cultural missions. And then I'll end by very briefly presenting a case study which is close to my own heart of how UK policymakers are working with arts and cultural organisations to experiment with innovative uses of digital technology. This is an application or an example of the non-linear creative processes that Nigel and Tim and others have alluded to. But first, let me just very briefly rehearse why we think it's so important to clearly define and measure the creative economy and who benefits from these metrics. So there are a number of key stakeholders when it comes to definition and measurement of the creative economy, perhaps most obviously policymakers, who need to know where are the hubs of creative activity. How can governments support them? How can governments support these drivers of growth? Where are the barriers to growth? And what can government do to remove them? Industry, well, industry is interested in knowing where in the creative economy are their potential clients, who are the most interesting suppliers, the collaborators over R&D, commercial collaborators more generally. Critically, what investments and practices in the creative economy are associated with better business performance, higher productivity, higher profitability? Investors, well, investors clearly are interested in benchmarking any investment proposition that comes along in the creative economy. So what do they compare that with? Where are the strongest companies based? What should they be looking for? Universities, well, we've heard from Nigel earlier, where are the opportunities in the creative economy for R&D collaborations? What and where are the education and skill needs for the workforce? Workers themselves, of course, they're interested in knowing what are the employment opportunities in this fast-growing sector. Where are they in the country? And last but not least, researchers like myself, we're interested in knowing what is the structure of the economy, how is it evolving over time, and what is driving innovation and growth. So the first step in, well, the one thing I should say is in January this year, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport in the UK introduced a new methodology for selecting which groups of occupations and industries should be classified as creative for measurement purposes. And the first step in this dynamic mapping process is to evaluate all occupations in the UK workforce against a set of criteria. There are 5 criteria which help us assess whether what the creative attributes of a role, of a job or an occupation is. These include the extent to which the work involves making novel decisions, whether the transformation affected by an occupation varies each time that job is done, whether the occupation has no clear mechanical or automated substitute. In this slide here, the SOC, the SOC acronym, which those of my UK colleagues like Tim will be familiar with this sort of language with discussions over measurement over the last year in the UK. SOC here refers to the official standard occupational classification, or SOC codes, that the statistical authorities use to classify occupations. And this procedure here, assessing the creative attributes of occupations, gives us a set of creative occupations for measurement purposes. Now, the second step involves using official labour market surveys to analyse the distribution of employment in these creative occupations across all industrial sectors in the economy. In other words, how does creative intensity, in the jargon, vary across all industries as measured by the official standard industrial classification codes, the SIC codes, that are again assigned to them by the statistical agencies. The creative intensity of an industry is therefore the percentage of its workforce that is employed in a creative occupation. Industries with very high creative intensities are defined as the creative industries. Now, people employed in creative occupations outside of these industries are what you might think of as embedded creative workers. They actually turn out to be a rather quantitatively important part of the UK workforce. In the creative economy then, the workforce in the creative economy is defined as the workforce in the creative industries and these embedded creatives that are working in other sectors of the economy. Now, another way of saying all of this is that while the creative industries specialise in creativity, they do not have a monopoly over it. So what I'd like to do is show you some data. The first thing I'm going to show you is a data visualisation, which is called a tree map. Now, hopefully this will work. So what this data visualisation shows is that, in fact, roughly 1/2 of the 1.8 million creative jobs in the UK workforce, this is a slightly different number to the 1.7 that you heard earlier. This is the number of people in creative jobs throughout the UK economy. Well, actually, the creative industries account for roughly 1/2 of those 1.8 million. If we look at these in a bit more detail, these different rectangular blocks in this visualization represent different creative industries. And the darker the color, the higher that industry's creative intensity. So, for example, artistic creation is the industry in the UK economy with the highest creative intensity. It employs just over 91,300 individuals, and the vast majority of those, almost 90% of those workers, are doing creative work. Looking across here, performing arts, creative intensity of just under 80%, employing almost 60,000 individuals, of which over 45,000 are in creative jobs. Interestingly, the two biggest sectors in terms of employment in the creative industries are ICT related, computer programming. Here, it's got a creative intensity of over 50%, and computer consultancy. And these two industries between them employ roughly 230,000 people in creative jobs. Now, whizzing back to the other side of the creative economy here, what we see is that there are over 900,000 people in creative jobs employed in sectors across the UK economy that are not counted as creative industries. These include, for example, what we've got here, product designers working in engineering, advertising professionals working in sectors like business and management consultancy, software developers working in public administration, and so on. Now, if you allow for the value added by these creative workers embedded in other sectors of the economy, at Nesta we estimate that the creative economy, this is this broader concept, which includes the creative industries, accounts for roughly 1/10 of the UK economy in gross value added. And if you compare that with industrial sectors like advanced manufacturing, financial services and construction, this puts the creative economy some way ahead. Now, if I can get the slideshow back on here. I want to show you a second visualization because aside from its size, another very striking feature of the UK's creative economy, and this is a feature that you see in other countries as well, is its geographical unevenness. So here's a map of Great Britain. I'm just going to show you this cartogram of Great Britain. What this does here, it plots the geography of Great Britain's creative economy, but it blows up a place's size proportionately to the size of its creative economy. So what you can see here is cities in the south of England. If I can just negotiate this mouse. Cities like Brighton, you've got Bristol there in the west of England, most obviously London. These are areas which are disproportionately, they're more prominent on this map than they otherwise would be. The concentration in the south of England is nothing more than a macroeconomic reflection of what we all know, which is the microeconomic phenomenon of clustering. Creative businesses have very strong incentives to cluster together. Nonetheless, the extent of this unevenness is striking and important. If, for example, we were to contrast this picture with the high-tech economy. Now, the high-tech economy, I won't have time to go into how we classify those, but these are industries which can't count large numbers of STEM workers, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics workers in their workforce. What you see here is concentrations. There's a concentration in the south of England, of course, but we also see areas like Aberdeenshire. I'm pretty sure that is up the top there. You've got West Cumbria, clusters like Derbyshire. The important point here is that clearly both the creative and the high-tech economies are overrepresented in the south of England. But in the case of the creative economy, the pattern is really quite extreme. In fact, we estimate that 43% of the UK's creative economy is accounted for by jobs in London and the southeast of England alone. And the only point I just want to note here is that this creates obvious challenges for policymakers who are charged with promoting growth in the whole nation, not just in the capital and in the southeast of England. So, it's widely expected that in coming years, and Nigel referred to this in his previous presentation, that artificial intelligence and robot technologies will automate very large numbers of jobs that are currently undertaken by humans. Mike Osborne and Carl Frey from the University of Oxford have famously estimated that 47% of the US workforce is at high risk of computerization or automation in the coming 20 years. Now, we're doing some new work with Mike and Carl, which is using machine learning methods and very detailed data on occupational characteristics to examine the relationship between the probability that an occupation is computerizable with the probability that it is creative. And the intuition for this research, I think, should be pretty clear to you, which is that creativity is a core bottleneck to automation, which should make creative jobs highly resistant to computerization. And that's indeed what we're finding. This chart here shows all employment in the UK economy by the probability that an occupation will be computerized over the next 20 years or so on the x-axis, and the probability that it is creative on the y-axis. Now, I'd like to draw your attention here to the square block on the top left-hand side of this graphic. It shows that jobs with a high likelihood of being creative, arbitrarily defined here as having a probability of greater than 0.7, generally have very low probabilities indeed of being computerized. In fact, 87% of creative jobs have a probability of being computerized of less than 0.3. Now, of all the occupations that make up the UK workforce, remember this is every occupation in the UK economy, the two occupations that represent visual artists and musicians, unsurprisingly, turn out to have the highest probability of being creative, essentially 1. But they also turn out to be those having near zero probabilities of computerization. Why am I showing you this? Well, what it means is that as artificial intelligence and robot technologies become more pervasive in the economy, the social returns from investing in artistic and creative skills more generally will become even higher than they currently are. The increasingly entwined relationship between art and technology is also seen in the behaviour of UK arts and cultural institutions. I'll just check how much time I've got left, incidentally. Andrea, how much time do I have? Still got a couple of minutes? Great. So this increasingly entwined relationship between art and technology that we've been discussing today is also actually seen in the behaviour of the UK's arts and cultural institutions. I'm going to show you a few slides here based on the first year's findings of Nesta's 3-year digital culture survey of how arts and cultural institutions in England are using technologies. The survey responses are from almost 900 arts and cultural organisations in England, spanning very different art forms, cultural forms, size and region. And they suggest that while technology is permeating all aspects of cultural activity, it is most important in relation to marketing activities, with almost 3/4 of arts and cultural organisations in England regarding digital technologies as now essential to their marketing. Almost 1/2 of arts and cultural organisations are creating what you might think of as born digital works, These are artworks that are native to and created for the digital space. There are, however, significant differences between art and cultural form. Those engaged in the exhibition of physical artefacts are far more likely to produce such works than those which do performance art. For example, you can see here that 64% of visual arts organisations in England report producing born digital artworks, compared with just over a third of theatres. The 12 months that ran up to the survey saw an increased adoption of digital technologies, with live streaming standing out as one of the fastest growing activities. And while still only 15% of these organisations are engaging in this activity, more than half had started doing so in the previous year. The picture is far from even, however, and if you look underneath these data, what you'll find is a very marked difference between larger and smaller organisations, with larger organisations much more likely to be simulcasting and doing live streaming. Now, as a result of all this greater engagement with technology, what we're finding is very large numbers of organisations reporting major positive impacts from digital technologies. However, again, this chart shows here that there's great variation across organisation type and art form. So, for example, almost 1/3 of performing arts venues, theatres, for example, opera houses, report such impacts. If you look at museums, it's only 3%. Now, when organisations are ranked by how important they judge digital technology to be to their own different activities, whether that's creation, marketing, distribution, archiving, exhibition, and so forth, the data reveals a very high degree of statistical clustering. In other words, what we find is that organisations that are embracing technology in, say, their creative practice are the same ones that are tending to do so in their operations and business models. So this figure here shows that the top 10% of organisations, you can think of these as being the digital enthusiasts, are far more likely to say that technology has had a major impact on their ability to meet their missions effectively, and they are over 3 times more likely to say that technology has had a major impact on their revenues and profitability. So what are these organisations doing differently to enjoy such returns? Well, the full research report gives more details, but what this slide here shows is that they are twice as likely to have expertise in digital technology distributed across their organisation, as opposed to held in the hands of 1 or 2 individuals. They are 2.5 times more likely to use data in the development of new products and services. And they're also more than twice as likely to say that technology has had a major impact at a strategic level. And they place value on external sources of technology expertise. And interestingly, a striking finding was how many of these organisations are reporting expertise on their board level, so non-executive board members with digital expertise. Now, crucially, they're significantly more likely to report that they experiment with new technologies, and their managers are much more likely to promote and prioritise R&D than other organisations. These findings are indicative, but nonetheless they do suggest that arts organisations and cultural institutions may need to increase their R&D activity if they want to enjoy the same paybacks as these organisations that are very digitally engaged. So all of this suggests that arts and cultural organisations may be able to enjoy a step change in their performance if they increase their R&D. And to support them in this task, funders in the UK have teamed up to run a digital R&D fund for the arts. This essentially works, this triangle shows it here, by connecting arts organisations, technology companies and academic researchers to test a technology-related proposition. And critically, the project teams are required to publish in full the research findings of their experiments, including the data. So this is an open data initiative. And the funders, including Nesta, aggressively share the findings from, across the arts and cultural sector. And this digital R&D fund for the arts in England alone, I'm not going to have time to go into any detail here, but it's supporting over 50 projects, the details of which are available on this rather nice website, Native. We believe, in fact we're pretty sure, that it's the world's largest open resource dedicated to R&D and digital innovation for the arts and culture. And we're increasingly finding countries from across the world are sort of reaching out to us through Native, and I'd be very keen to talk to organisations that are interested in this agenda in Korea. So to summarise what I've said, art and technology make highly significant and self-standing contributions to the creative economy in the UK. Future technology trends are likely to make this combined use of art and technology even more potent. We already have indications of this in the varied and fast-growing ways in which arts and cultural organisations in England are using technologies. Policymakers throughout the UK are now exploring actively how they can best support these developments. Thank you.